Hi everyone, it's yvetteleblowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to Feel Good From Within. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest, Dr. Sophia Godkin. Dr. Sophia Godkin is a psychologist, happiness and healing coach, author, and educator. She is the author of 3 books. Here today to talk about her brand new book, The Soul Journal, inspiring prompts to reflect, find inner peace, and nourish your spiritual growth. So with that in mind, I'd love to welcome all of our listeners, plus our very special guest, Dr. Sophia Godkin. This is the second time back. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Yvette, for having me. I'm so good seeing your smiling face and knowing that we're going to have a meaningful conversation today as we have before. It just brings me lots of joy. So I'm so happy to be here with you, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm super excited to have you back on the show. You look amazing. You have the biggest smile, the brightest blue eyes. Everybody go to the Spirit Girl YouTube channel. For our listeners, are you happy to tell them a little bit about yourself?
I would love to, Yvette. Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I think it's such an important one because we don't get to where we are today just by sort of plopping into the present, right? We have a history and our history shapes us. And that was definitely the case for me. So I studied to be a health psychologist. I was sort of in the research and teaching side of things. And when I look back, I think I was really protecting myself from doing a lot of the work that I needed to do on myself because I was young, I wasn't ready. So I was sort of going the intellectual side of psychology. And then, interestingly enough, once I got my PhD, all of a sudden I was ready. I was ready to turn inward and do all of the work that was required to really practice and live what I was reading about in the literature. And so I started to do a lot of applied psychology and energy healing work and just invested myself in both learning and sort of participating in lots of healing practices. So I like to say that I was always an optimistic child. I was born, this smiley, optimistic person. Maybe you have someone like that in your own life, those people who it's just their nature, right? It's just their nature to smile, and you might think they're happy all the time, things like that. So I'm one of those people. I was born one of those people. But at some point during that time that I was describing, I realized that I wasn't actually happy. Like, I looked happy on the outside, but on the inside, there was a different narrative playing. I was feeling very lost. I was feeling just not like myself. I didn't feel free. I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I didn't feel comfortable in the world. And that's when all of that healing work that I'm describing really started. And that's what led me to do what I do today, which is to really help people find that true joy from within by really understanding and learning how to relate to their thoughts and emotions differently, and also healing those past wounds that we'd like to think go away on their own, but that really don't, right? And they really need our attention. They need our love. And that was no different for me. So I'm sitting with you here as someone who struggled just like everybody else, who continues to do the work, who continues to apply what I know to really create a life that is worth living, but a life where I can also contribute to the world, because that gives me purpose and meaning. And I know that's the case for many who are listening today too. I'm just so happy to be here because I know that my journey is just one example of the types of struggles that we're born into in this world. And none of us are alone, right? And I think it's really important to share these stories. So thank you for letting me share mine just a little bit by talking about how I got to where I am today.
When it comes to your brand and business and psychology services, you are known as the happiness doctor. What was the meaning behind that, and what prompted you to want to use that title?
Thank you for that question, Yvette. It was actually a title given to me by a friend who knew me really well. She and I were sitting one day and I was finally ready to share content, to share my voice with the world. It took a long time, but I was finally there, and I'm sitting with her and thinking, what's my brand going to be? What's the title? And we went on for days and nothing fit. I'm very intuitive. I'm very in touch with my body. And I know when there's a yes, and I know when there's not a yes. And there were many not yeses for a long time until she said, "You're the happiness doctor." And I said, you know what? I totally am. And the reason that was a big yes for me, and I look back, my whole life has been an answer to the question, how do I find that true happiness from within? I mentioned earlier that I came to a big realization that, oh my gosh, I'm not actually happy. This thing that I'm calling happiness or that I'm pretending is happiness isn't really happiness. I know there's more in life than how I'm feeling right now. I've always been on a quest, whether it was through my education or through my own personal pursuits or relationships, to really uncover how it is that we can each create that feeling, that experience, that kind of life that feels truly, genuinely happy from within, not one that just looks that way from the outside. So when my friend said, "You're the happiness doctor," I was also teaching positive psychology courses at the time, which is all about the science of happiness. It felt right. And here we are many years later with the Happiness Doctor brand.
In regards to you going on your own happiness journey and seeking happiness from within, what are some of the things you had to do as part of your discovery of your own authentic self?
What a good question, Yvette. Thank you. Yeah. What are some of the things I had to do in order to reveal that the true joy, as I call it today, or that authenticity, as you just mentioned? I think one of the things was getting really real with myself as to where I was being and living in alignment with myself and where I was just living so as to please other people. I grew up an immigrant child of immigrant parents with really firm expectations of who I needed to be in order to be successful in this world. We all want to be good children, right? And I was no different. So I grew up with a list of things that I needed to accomplish in order to be seen as worthy, as lovable, as capable. And there came a time, and it was actually once I completed that list, that I said, okay, F this. Completing some of those things allowed my inner world, my nervous system to say, okay, now we're going to drop those expectations of us and we're going to do what we really want to do. We're going to be who we really want to be, because we know that that inauthentic joy, that thing that we're experiencing that we're saying isn't really happiness, is a function of the fact that I'm not living true to myself. So one of the things I had to do in response to your question is get real with myself as to how I was living in complete misalignment with my own values, my own needs, and my own desires, and where I was living according to the values, needs, and desires of either society or my parents or other family members. We are born into a world that has norms and expectations of us. And you mentioned my latest book, The Soul Journal. One of the things that it does is it asks those questions, the ones that I'm telling you that I had to ask myself, to really help you understand where you might be falling into that trap of living according to society's norms and values and standards and expectations, which there's nothing wrong with, unless you're sacrificing your own happiness and your own values and your own standards and desires. So there are questions like that in the book, and those are some of the questions I asked myself. I also had to get uncomfortable. I had to learn how to really get uncomfortable. When I look back on my journey, sometimes I think, why couldn't I get to the stuff that works faster? Like, why did it take so long to get to what really works? And by what really works, I mean what really helps me to heal and become the woman that I know I'm supposed to be, that I'm here to be, to become the best version of myself. And it's because I think I took a road that many people take, which is sort of pursuing the practices and teachings and reading the books that say nice things, that say things that feel good. And there's nothing wrong with the law of attraction, for example, but if that's the only thing that you're pursuing, it's very limited. It doesn't take into account our whole humanity and our whole being. We can have a whole other episode about that. But I think, yeah, part of my problem and one of the mistakes I made that I know other people make is getting sucked into feeling good all of the time. And by getting sucked into wanting to feel good all the time, I wasn't willing to feel uncomfortable, which is the very thing I needed to do to heal some of those old hurts and old wounds that were really holding me back, that were really leading me to feel like I wasn't good enough to be in this professional role or to be in a certain relationship. And that really led me to play small. So I would say those are two of the things I really had to do. I had to be willing to get uncomfortable. And I had to ask myself those hard questions about where I was totally abandoning myself and abandoning my own values and my own needs and desires for the sake of pleasing others.
Wow. I learned so much from your answer then. I loved how you said, I had to get real with myself, and how you had to really focus on your own values and then align with them, which your values might be different to society's values or advertising values. When you were talking about that, I couldn't help think, we went through this transition where we were told we needed to create 3 pieces of content every day. Every day we had to post a photo. We had to post every single day content on Instagram. Can I tell you, I tried that and it didn't make me happy. And I discovered, why am I not happy? Because I'm doing something that someone else has said, you need to do this. You all have to do this. You're all bloggers, or you have a business. You all need to post. And then it was creating so much stress because what am I going to post? I'm sure our listeners might be able to resonate with this. If you run a business, it's, what content today? What content today? And all this kerfuffle. And then I discovered, hang on a minute, what if I do what's best for me? What aligns with my own self and my authentic self? And what if I go back to the simple practice of creativity, of just creating as it arises from within and honoring the natural creativity process? And then that unlocked feeling, not like fear of missing out, going, you know what? It's most important I feel good from within and happy. It's got nothing to do with the algorithm or what other people say you have to do. And I think that really helped. So now I'm really content. And the pandemic has helped, of course, where I don't feel an obligation or a requirement to have to post photos of me every single day or videos every single day. And I find that there are so many standards and requirements and obligations that we can fall into a bit of a misalignment or disconnection from our true authentic self. What do you think about that, Dr. Sophia Godkin?
Oh, I think you're right on the money there, Yvette. Yes. I mean, what you're describing is anytime we take an action that is should or a need, like you need to do this or you should do this, right? It's coming from outside forces. How you so beautifully stated, rather than being inspired from within ourselves, rather than coming from our heart and soul. Even my voice changed as I was talking about that, because there's such a huge difference in creating content or speaking or acting from a place that is required and forced, relative to a place that's inspired and creative and intrinsically motivated because you have something to say, you have something you want to share with the world. It's a completely different experience for you, and it's a completely different experience for the people that you are hoping to reach. And one way that I like to think about this, because I've gone through exactly what you've gone through, these hard questions that I talk about asking myself, I keep asking them to myself because, again, we live in a world where there's so many things going on. It's much easier to get out of alignment with yourself than it is to stay in alignment. One of the things I like to remind myself of is the intention behind the content that I'm posting. So if I'm posting content or whatever action it is that you're doing, just fill in the blank. Why are you taking that action? You're taking that action to align with people who resonate with you. And if you're creating content from a place of force and must and shoulds, you're not even being yourself. So who are you reaching and who are you going to be resonating with? You might reach some people, but are they going to be the people that you really want to align with you and to be in your community and to sort of share time and space with? Maybe not. So completely agree with you, Yvette. I think what you said was so true and can be applied to so many situations for so many people. And I think take the time to ask ourselves those questions like, am I in alignment with what's true for me right now? Because guess what? The only person who knows what's true for you is you, right? No one's going to come and knock on your door and say, hey, you're not in alignment right now. That's why it takes some of us like 6 months or a year to realize like, oh my gosh, I hate this job. Like, why am I still there? Or this relationship isn't working. It takes us such a long time because we get into our rhythms and habits and we don't ask ourselves those questions. So right. And I so appreciate how you express that, Yvette.
Because what I discovered is the time that you're creating content, that very precious time. It takes time to create content, whether it's a photo, a video, a post. That time I could flip it and sit on the beach, read a book, connect to nature, connect to myself, actually do some yoga, go for a walk, journal, practice self-care. And it's the best I've probably felt in years because I stopped listening to these so-called marketing gurus who are like, if you don't post this many times, you're going to get left behind. You got to post, you got to post, you got to post. What are some things our audience could do if they wanted to feel happier from within and more connected to themselves?
What a beautiful question. We just talked about sort of the practical things, which are really asking yourself those questions, really turning inward and asking, is what I'm doing now in alignment? Is what I'm doing now true to myself? Is how I'm being now true to myself? Is where I'm living now true to myself? Is how I'm showing up in the world true to myself? So that's one of the practical things we can do. And the other things that sort of lead to that sense of really living in alignment and really being happy from within all comes down to the relationship that you have with you. So it's all about building that relationship that you have with you. So, what makes a good relationship between two people? What makes a good relationship? Honesty, transparency, being there for someone when they're struggling, letting them know that you're there no matter what, being there for them in times of need, showing compassion, showing love, showing respect, honoring their needs. These are all components of a good relationship. So now let's turn that inward. Are you honoring your own needs? Are you showing yourself compassion? Are you showing yourself love no matter what's going on? Are you respecting yourself? Are you aligning with what's true for you? And that relationship with yourself, there's really a range of the kind of relationship we can have with ourselves. We don't even know that we can have a relationship with ourselves. We're seeking validation, we're seeking approval, we're seeking appreciation from the outer world, from the external world. And happiness from within is we're no longer seeking that approval, that validation, or anything else that we need to feel like we're the human beings from out there. And we're learning how to provide it for ourselves. And it doesn't mean that we don't engage in loving, nurturing relationships with other people or that we don't lean on other people for support, but it becomes less of a need and more of a want. I want to have people around me, but I know how to provide for myself. I know how to provide love for myself. I know how to be there for myself in moments of need. I know how to nurture myself. I know how to be that loving parent to myself that maybe I didn't have when I was growing up. We each have that opportunity to create a loving, nurturing inner world based on how we relate to ourselves in each moment of any day. You know, our thoughts and emotions come up, for example. What do? Are we pushing them away? Are we ignoring them? Are we suppressing them? Are we hiding them? Are we pretending they're not there? And that's the norm. That's kind of what we're taught to do. But if you, again, take that outside and consider that a relationship between you and yourself, it's kind of like you're pushing somebody away all the time. Somebody's trying to get your attention and you're saying, I don't have time for you. Like, I don't have time. I'm busy, or you don't feel good, so I'm not going to pay attention to you, right? Our thoughts and emotions are reflections of our inner world, our inner child, however you want to think of it. And it's really important that we tend to what's going on inside. So, again, we each have an opportunity to really build a relationship from the inside that expresses as happiness on the outside. And we can still have a fancy house if that's what we really want. We can still have a successful podcast. We can still have whatever we want. But our happiness isn't dependent on that. And to me, that's true happiness. Knowing that I can be content no matter what is going on in life. Because guess what? Life is filled with all sorts of experiences, good, bad, somewhere in between. We're going to have it all. Many people end up being on a roller coaster of emotion their whole life because things are good, I feel good. Things are bad, I feel bad. And for me, it's like, okay, that's one way to live, but what if we can live without that roller coaster? And that comes down to that relationship that I explained. If we can create that nurturing, loving relationship, that happiness from the inside out, we no longer have to be on that roller coaster. We can really be content no matter what.
Wow, that was so empowering. We can be content no matter what. That was beautiful, all of your tips and insights, and made me realize that we can disconnect with ourselves if we have emotions and thoughts and feelings and we don't want to feel it. We can just be on our phone and distract ourselves. And then you mentioned, just like a relationship, we're pushing ourselves away. Obviously, we have to get more comfortable with sitting by ourselves and with ourselves. And the soul journal is brilliant for that, where you have the inspiring prompts to reflect, find inner peace, and nourish your spiritual growth. There are so many prompts in the soul journal. Are you happy to share one prompt with our audience and with our beautiful listeners?
Yes, there's one that I think would be really nice to share. And before I do, I want to just describe the principle behind this prompt. Aligning with yourself, aligning with your soul indicates that there is a part of you, there is a soul that is you. And also, there are parts of you that are not the soul. And those parts of you that are not your soul, they're not bad in any way. It's important to recognize that those parts of you that are not your soul, they might have certain fears or beliefs that were adopted throughout your life. There are parts that might harbor fear for some reason, or anger for some reason, or might still feel hurt from the past, or might feel frustrated or overwhelmed, or just have certain feelings and beliefs that might not always be constructive, or that might lead you to behave in ways that aren't in full alignment. I asked the question earlier of, are you in alignment or are you not in alignment? It's one thing to say yes or no to that question, and it's another whole thing to understand, okay, why am I not in alignment, right? Because we all want to be in alignment. If I'm not in alignment, it's not a conscious decision. It's happening below the surface, it's happening unconsciously. So that leads me to this question. Think back to the last big decision you made and pause to think, who made the decision? Was it a deeper aspect of you, your soul? Or was it a part of your personality that was feeling hurt, afraid, or insecure? How did this decision turn out? So, the prompts in this book are actually 3-step prompts where you get to resolve this whole thing based on this question. But just looking at this question alone, you can have the opportunity to create an awareness for yourself of why you do the things you do. Or am I taking an action that's encouraged by my soul? Or am I taking an action that's being decided on by a hurt part of me, or an insecure part of me, or an afraid part of me? So, for example, think about the last thing you did, maybe in a relationship. What was the motivation behind it? What part of you made that decision? Was it a part of your personality that might be feeling insecure, or was it another part of you, some higher essence, your soul?
You mentioned insecurity then in relationships, and this comes up so much. Can the insecurity be from feeling you're not enough? Can it be from past hurt? Maybe someone's been cheated on. There are so many things that might come into play, isn't there, when someone says, I feel insecure? When it comes to someone feeling insecure in a relationship, what could they do in that moment?
So you're not alone if you're feeling insecure and you're dating or you're in a serious relationship with somebody. Are certain actions that people might take, like ghosting or cheating, that would make any person feel insecure regardless of their past. And there are things from our past that make us more vulnerable to feeling insecure in a relationship. So oftentimes, people will experience what I like to call recycled pain. It's not necessarily an insecurity that's coming from just the present situation with the present partner, but it's an insecurity that's been there for a long time, and it's just being triggered by the current situation. But it's been around for a while because mom or dad weren't really around, or maybe dad was physically around but not really emotionally around, or maybe mom and dad got divorced, the child felt abandoned, or whatever it is. This experience of insecurity in relationships is just so common and affects so many people around the world. And in regards to your question of what can people do, I would say, in the moment, focus on that relationship you have with you. Because if you're feeling insecure and there was an action taken by somebody in that moment that led you to feel insecure, have some compassion for yourself, because nobody deserves to be treated like that. And it's not cool. Let's just say it very plainly. It's not cool to be treated like that. And once you show compassion for yourself, you're more likely to act in a way that reinforces your self worth rather than takes away from it. So rather than begging for the relationship to stay, you'll be more likely to create boundaries and say, hey, this isn't working for me. This type of behavior doesn't work for me. So let's take a break, or let's reconsider, whatever the boundary might be, whatever the need might be that you express. You know that insecurity has roots in your past, which again, for so many people, it does. You're not alone. I would say also to seek some help from a coach or therapist who's qualified to help you heal your past, because it's so wonderful what can happen in the present day when you take care of things that have happened to you a long time ago that weren't your fault at all. None of this was your fault, but As an adult, it's your responsibility to sort of show up in the best way that you can, which might mean really getting in touch with the experiences that happened in your past and really integrating them into who you are today. Not necessarily reliving them, sort of integrating them and spending some time healing what needed to be healed. In the moment, I would say practice self compassion. Again, that relationship you have with you, if something's happening that doesn't feel good, I would want a friend to put their hand on me and say, hey, no, this isn't about you. You did nothing wrong. Did nothing wrong, and everything's going to be okay. So that's what I would do for myself. If nobody's there to do that for me, I do it for myself. And that's the opportunity we all have. We can do that for ourselves, to practice self compassion in that moment and to really nurture ourselves so that, again, we can take the action that's best for us. We can set a boundary. We can stand up for ourselves. We can maybe end a relationship, or we can ask for what we need, consider a new situation or a new relationship. To me, the best solution is always one that happens inside of you, because again, we have all of the tools, we have the ability to change how we feel about any situation by being there for ourselves. And that's where happiness from within really comes from. That's where that principle comes from. We have that ability to do that for ourselves in any moment.
I love that. And when you were sharing that with us, which was an incredible explanation, thank you, and so insightful, it just made me think that we need to clean up or really process, work through the past, which can keep coming up because you might be in a relationship with a guy or a girl and they might be totally smitten on you. But if you are feeling insecure in your own mind, you might be thinking, oh, maybe they're going to meet someone else. There'll be someone better than me out there. It's all happening within yourself, but it might not even be that that person is going to find anyone else. They might be completely smitten on you, but because you've got your own internal insecurities coming up, you're so right. Speaking to someone about it, either a therapist or a coach, and working through it could get everybody into a much more secure place. Love
Absolutely.
it. What I really love about the Soul Journal is the ability to do self reflection, inward work, because I'm a true believer that everything starts from within. And when I think about the world we're living in now, we're not emphasizing enough on self reflection. That's why you're here today, really just sitting down and having time for ourselves and connecting with ourselves and listening to ourselves, feeling within ourselves. I know when I speak to the younger generation, they feel very pressured to be connected to the phone, to be creating content, to be always doing, doing, doing. I love the Soul Journal because it reminds us to really reflect inwards on ourselves instead of outwards. So that's really key, isn't it, to finding happiness and contentment. Taking, even if it's 10 minutes out of the day, to have a nice cup of coffee or a tea and just be.
Yes, absolutely, Yvette. And you said it best when you said it all starts from within. The world we see out there is a function of what's going on in here. So if we're just hustling through life, which I have a lot of personal experience in, I grew up in New York City. I'm a professional at being busy and running around town. But if that's all we're doing, what kind of life are we living? Probably very disconnected from ourselves, which creates a lot of disconnection in our relationships, in our career, probably, and in other places in our life. It doesn't need to feel like a chore. Sometimes we think about this relationship with ourselves or taking time for ourselves or taking time to reflect as a chore, but it doesn't have to be at all. I like what you said as far as having a cup of coffee. Like, it's as simple as that. Take a minute to actually be with what you're doing right now. Having a cup of coffee, you're doing it anyway. So let's see what would happen if we could tune in beneath the thoughts that are happening, beneath the feelings that are happening, and we could just be with ourselves for a few moments each day, or read one question from a book and see what sorts of thoughts and feelings that brings up in us. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be complex. We do live in a very rich and complex world. If we're not paying attention to ourselves, if we're not taking time for ourselves, our life will reflect that. Our world out there, our personal world out there is a function of what's happening in here, and our collective world is too. Right now, we're living in a world where there's war, a lot of misunderstanding and conflict between people. And it's a function of the conflicts we're experiencing, at least in part, it's a function of the conflicts we're experiencing within ourselves.
And when we talk about happiness, people would assume when they look at marketing photos or videos or on Instagram, happiness is like, "Ah, happy, happy, happy." And it's really upbeat and joyful. And we got all this joy going on. And this happiness would just stay like this all day. But as we know, that isn't how it works. This whole happiness isn't like we're just in this happy emotion for the whole day and the whole night. I know from my experience that doesn't happen. One emotion only. Can you share more about this?
Oh, I would love to, Yvette. We might be here for a while. But that's one of the biggest myths about happiness, that you have to be happy all of the time, or that happiness is only about feeling good. But when you look at people who are happy, they're not feeling good all of the time. They're not happy all of the time. It's very natural for us to have a myriad of emotions as human beings. The problem happens, again, when we judge our emotions, we push them away, we push our thoughts away, we suppress certain feelings, and that creates a whole barrage and cycle of negative feeling and negative thinking that wasn't actually there in the first place. So there's actually nothing wrong with having this variety of emotions as long as we don't pressure ourselves into feeling good all the time. It's that pressure that creates the suffering. It's that pressure that creates the unhappiness. It's really fascinating in a way. We're doing the very things that cause unhappiness when we pressure ourselves to be happy all the time, when we pressure ourselves to be like the girl holding the balloon. It's my favorite photo to like reflect on because it's so unrealistic. Why are there so many photos of girls with balloons sort of flying in the air? When I look for stock photos for my website or for an article, it's the girl with the balloon. And do you ever see that in real life? No, we're grounded. Our feet are on the floor. Our feet are on the earth. Maybe we're smiling, maybe we're not, and that's okay. The quality of our life is based on the degree to which we can manage and handle all of these things that happen in a life well lived, which is all sorts of things. We mentioned earlier, good, bad, anywhere in between. And so to pressure ourselves to be happy all the time is a disservice to who we are as human beings. And it's completely unrealistic and actually causes further unhappiness. I really love that you asked that question because I think if we could all stop pressuring ourselves to feel happy, we would be much better off.
Wow. When it comes to happiness, it can be just being able to sit by yourself. And I know this for me is such a big thing where I can sit by myself, which is phone free,
Mm.
and I know I'm in a good place if I feel a sense of ease, a sense of comfort. I can just feel that I can sit, and instead of my thoughts racing, I can just sit there and breathe and ground myself. And I find if my thoughts are just sort of plodding along or floating along like clouds, that I'm in a good place. And for me, that's a nice feeling, just being content and being able to sit with myself and be with myself and within myself. But I do find that to me is happiness. Do you feel that sometimes we get a little bit confused with happiness, meaning happiness is the big smile and it's the massive, joyful emotions, but happiness could still be being content?
Yes, yes, yes. I remember thinking at some point in time, should I continue to call myself the happiness doctor? Happiness is just so misunderstood. Oh, maybe I should change it to something with genuine joy or contentment for the very reason that you're asking. Because, yes, happiness is often likened to these huge smiles and this state that we very rarely experience, right? When we're doing something completely out of the ordinary or something so new that creates a certain kind of experience for our mind and body. But we don't need those experiences to really feel true happiness. And I think that's what you were alluding to in terms of just being there and watching your thoughts float like a cloud in the sky. That to me is soul alignment. You are connected to your soul and you're observing your thoughts, observing what's happening in your inner world without assuming that your identity is those thoughts. So all of a sudden, there's this soul that's living life. It's not just your personality or fears or insecurities that are living this life, but all of a sudden, there's also this soul, this true essence, this thing inside you that maybe you can't necessarily touch or put your fingers on. But yes, you're living from this place that maybe has a higher meaning or purpose for you. And it's from that
Mm,
place that we really seamlessly and effortlessly can experience joy, and where we can really seamlessly and effortlessly share it with others. We don't have to
mm.
try really hard. And I mean, the word contentment probably sums it up best in terms of what's available in the English language today. True happiness is that feeling of inner peace, that sense of contentment, that sense of just knowing this moment is perfect. Like, let's take
Wow.
this moment right now, Yvette. What's wrong with
Yes.
this moment? There is nothing wrong with this moment.
Yeah, it's so true. Just
Yeah.
being here with you in your presence and with our audience is so beautiful. What would you say to anyone who's listening today who says they're afraid to be by themselves with their own thoughts? They're afraid to be without their mobile phone. They don't think they could even sit by themselves without their mobile phone.
First, I would say that I can really understand what you're experiencing, the world that we're living in. The reality is one of being so connected to the outer world that you don't really have the time or awareness to connect to yourself. So I really understand why it can feel scary to be alone with your thoughts, or why it can feel so alarming when you think of the idea of being without your phone. I totally understand. And so, what I would say is don't pressure yourself to do those things. There's no pressure to do that right now or right after you hear this conversation. Just start with acknowledging to yourself that maybe you wouldn't mind if you lived a little differently. Maybe you wouldn't mind if life felt a little more authentic. Maybe you wouldn't mind if you felt like you were living a little more true to you, and not always to be at the beck and call of others, or to perform or entertain others, or whatever it might be that you feel you need to do by being connected all of the time. And then when you feel ready, whenever that moment comes, start with 10 seconds. Again, there's no pressure, because we only want to do things as we feel ready. We don't want to throw ourselves into frozen pond, really scare those parts of us that are really truly afraid. And it's their fear is so valid, because we only really know how to live with having this protection of a phone, this protection of busyness, or this protection of distraction that really prevents us from feeling. We all have our version of that. So again, don't pressure yourself, but when you feel ready, take 10 seconds. Do I feel okay? Check in with yourself. Get the permission inside. Do I feel okay taking 10 seconds away from the phone right now? Yeah.
Feel that discomfort. Just take 10 seconds away from the phone. During the pandemic, you obviously were working on the Soul Journal. It's just launched very recently. How does it feel now to see the Soul Journal out?
It feels amazing. When I write, my hope is always that questions that I've written or content that I've written lands in the hands and hearts of people who need it most. So it feels great to have it out there. I'm always confident that how the world works, how the universe works, is to make that happen, is to really have this tool for true happiness. That's what I consider the books that I've written, just to be tools for true happiness, because we all need tools. We all need tools for our toolbox of life. So the expectation is that these tools will reach the people who need them most. And we all need support along the journey. So there's absolutely no shame in that. That's why I'm so passionate about creating tools for the journey, because we all need support. We all need help. We all need a helping, nurturing hand. So I'm just thrilled to see it out there. To me, it's not about having my name out there on a book. It's much more about the reception of the book by people who need it. So if you're listening right now and you happen to grab the book, reach out to me. Let me know that you have it. Let me know what you liked and how it impacted you. That's what really warms my heart.
I love that. The Soul Journal is available on booktopia.com.au and all bookstores. What I love about the Soul Journal is sometimes we don't know as an individual what question to ask. Especially if we're not trained as a psychologist, we might not know what question to ask to get to the answer we are looking for. This is your third book now. You've shared your other journal on the podcast show, and that was really beneficial and helpful for everyone. So I would encourage you to get actually any of Dr. Sophia Godkin's journals. You give so much. You're always helping people. How are you taking care of your own self, and what are some of your self-care rituals that you currently are doing?
What a good question, Yvette. Thank you for asking. I've talked about my journey before. I've definitely neglected myself in decades past, and I don't do that anymore. I have quite a list of things that I do for myself. One of them is moving my body. For as long as I can remember, I've been someone who needs to move in order to get my mind into a place that feels good. So most mornings I'm doing some kind of movement, exercise or yoga or strength training or something. That's something that's sort of a staple in my life. Social connection to me is huge. I live sort of apart from my closest friends. They live in other parts of the world. For me, forming connections where I am physically and, making sure to connect with the people I love all over the world, for me, just nourishes my heart and soul. And I have that scheduled into my week. I have that scheduled several times into the week just to make sure that I never feel depleted from that love that I get from the friendships that I've spent so much time building and from those people that really know my heart. There are so many things. One of the latest additions to my life is my cat Leo. Having a little animal at home, I forgot how amazing it was. I used to have a pet. I didn't have a pet probably for the last 3 or 4 years. And so having a cat again is just amazing. I don't have children, so having a little creature to take care of every day, just brings so much joy to my life. And he's the sweetest and cuddliest little animal. And I'm definitely someone who has a love language of physical touch. So we're always cuddling. I'm probably one of those cat people, but it's okay. I'm owning it. I'm totally owning it.
I love it.
It's such a good way to nurture myself and soothe my nervous system. We didn't talk about the nervous system much today. We really feel the stress of the past, and we really feel the stress of trauma. We feel the stress of the present in terms of our nervous system. And so some of the things I mentioned are really ways to soothe the nervous system, nurture the nervous system. And yeah, they're definitely part of my self-care routine. So I'm so glad you asked.
I'm so glad you also have a cat in your life, Leo, because I was only reading the other day how beneficial pets are for our mental health and well-being, and how they can increase oxytocin
Mhm.
and the dopamine from the love of a pet and having that connection. The animals are so incredible, aren't they, for making us feel good?
They really are. And just to come full circle, it's really nice to observe how they relate to us unconditionally. And it's a really nice example of how we can relate to ourselves. Sometimes it's as simple as just, putting a hand on you, putting a little paw on you. Sort of symbolically, we can do that for ourselves when we need a little bit of soothing or a little bit of stress reduction or love. They're the best example of unconditional love and support and nurturance.
And maybe we need to be more like cats, where they spend a lot more time chilling out, relaxing. They're definitely phone free unless their owners are doing TikToks on them. But we can learn a lot from animals, can't we? How they just really relaxed and chilled and lay around, and they're not so on the go. Dr. Sophia Godkin, what is your hope for your newfound book readers?
My hope for my newfound book readers, Yvette, is to really understand and feel just how loved and worthy and capable they are. That's what aligning with our soul and really fine tuning that ability to create happiness from within. It allows us to live as the worthy, capable, and loved humans that we've always been, except we might have believed that we weren't. My hope is that once and for all, we stop believing the untruths that we've believed about ourselves. And my hope is that you all feel just how capable, just how worthy, and just how loved you are and have always been.
Ah, that is such a beautiful hope. How can we stay in touch with you after this podcast show?
I would love it if y'all visited me on thehappinessdoctor.com. You can find the books, you can find courses and programs there, other ways to connect with me, and you can, of course, find me on social media at The Happiness Doctor.
And I totally recommend that you sign up to Dr. Sophia Godkin's thehappinessdoctor.com emails, because I love receiving them and reading them, and I always learn so much from you. Well, Dr. Sophia Godkin, thank you so much for being a guest second time round on the Spirit Girl podcast show. Thank you so much. It's been just an absolute pleasure catching up with you and learning from you. And thank you for sharing your insights, tips, books, and really authentic messages. It's just been absolutely beautiful, and I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Oh, and I'm so grateful for you, Yvette. It's always such a delight to talk to you. It's an easy yes for me anytime you reach out. I love your energy. I love your heart. And I love how you're sharing messages that people need to hear. So thank you. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you so much. We'll say goodbye to Dr. Sophia Godkin. Bye. Be sure to subscribe, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love to. And together, let's feel good from within.